Hello and welcome back to another episode of Gaming at the Round Table. I'm Crystal with Maverick and JoJo.
Hello.
So this topic is something people fight about a lot. It's mouse and keyboard versus controller. I don't remember what it was called. So I'm just going to start off by saying I personally think it depends on the game.
That's actually a factor in a lot of it.
Yeah. Now, mouse and keyboard is still superior in every single way, but it depends on the game. Now, are we including for controllers stuff like Joy-Cons?
Yeah.
They technically fall into it, so.
Yeah. I mean, those are not superior, but still, I feel like mouse and keyboard just has so many more capabilities as far as mapping your buttons. I mean, here, I'm going to show a good example here. This is my mouse. There are 12 buttons on the side. You got 2 buttons, 3 buttons on the top, 3 more there, a roller.
And Alt Shift.
And I can map, a lot of games have where I can map whatever button I want on there.
That's a G600 for anyone just listening, Logitech device. There are competitors in the market, but most MMO mice are going to be what you'd Google.
And then compared to, and that's only half of mouse and keyboard, right? That's just my mouse. Compared to the controller that has the 8 buttons on the front, 2 on the top. Like, I don't have one of those fancy controllers. I don't have back paddles. I don't have the adjusters. Now, my friend did put me on to a really nice controller that has the abilities to do stuff like that, but it's still, it just doesn't compare. I don't know.
I want to point out, like, one neutral factor to everything is money matters.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not even debatable. Like, depending on the budget that you're gaming at, it's going to be a massive, massive factor. It's like she just mentioned with the stock version of just a PS5 controller, which is a very solid controller, compared to, like, the Xbox, which gives you a broader budget range of controllers that you can customize and use. Now, their accuracy and otherwise are kind of iffy depending on which one you get. As somebody that's purchased, I would say 5 to 6 different custom, and I'm air quoting this, controllers, the price makes a difference. And there's some that cost a lot for absolutely no reason. And it's the same in the M&K or PC world.
Yeah, I mean, people get so worked into this, especially in PC arenas, right? So I feel like we have to talk about the details to even tackle the big topic, which is mouse and keyboard versus controller, because there's the broad categories of comfort. What, are you using a sledgehammer when you only need a ball peen hammer? Like that factors in, right? So Monster Hunter World, let's start at high level and then I'll dig down a little. High level, when I play action games that don't have like MMO style inputs where you have 32 different moves with different buttons that you could map to, most action games that you're going to play, generally you don't need more buttons. And if you do, at best, maybe map one of your controller buttons to act like a shift on a keyboard. So that instead of X, now you have Shift X, right? And Shift Square or Triangle or whatever, Y, A, B for the Xbox people. So that aside, I would never use a mouse and keyboard over my controller for most of the action games I play that have very few buttons, because it's such a huge sledgehammer for something that I could hap this with the back of a screwdriver. Like, just get it in there, get it done. And I don't want to sacrifice for me, and I'm even going to argue for most people, a controller is going to be more comfortable to game with than a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah.
I know that there are going to be people that are like, well, not for me, and I've got this ergonomic setup and all this other stuff, but like, yeah, I would hold up my keyboard, but it doesn't, I can't pull it away from my computer. But like, I can hold my controller and take it with me. I can unplug it and just go to the kitchen. And the PS5, and I'm sure the new Xbox ones too, it has the microphone in it, right? It's like a really nice, compact, convenient thing. There are many other examples. Let's dive down one level. Let's assume we want a little bit more power, right?
Mm-hmm.
The keyboard and mouse is still an argument of knowing how to use them to their potential. I think that is a huge topic as well. If you take a super casual gamer, super casual, like a kid or someone just only games now and then, a controller is going to be eons more intuitive to them and accessible than a mouse and keyboard. Just tell someone, okay, put your fingers on TFGB. And everyone listening right now that's a gamer is like, what do you mean? I mean WSAD, right? No, because you have to take it from the perspective of someone that's not used to using it. They have to look at the keyboard and go, okay, TFHG.
Unless you took a typing class in middle school.
Right. And even then, your hand position is going to be wildly different than if you're typing. So it's going to be awkward.
Of when I first played with mouse and keyboard, I was introduced to the game Guild Wars 2.
An MMO, yeah.
An MMO. And I was just starting, and Maverick would cringe all the time because I was, what is it called? Keyboard turning?
It's called keyboard turning.
Where you turn around really slow.
You're turning around really slow. In many computer games, if you don't use your mouse to turn and you use the keyboard turn, your character turns at a snail's pace, like uncomfortably turns slow.
Yeah.
You can imagine being like, hey, don't look behind you, but this person's staring at you. And someone just slowly turning around. Like that's what it looks like in the game. And that killed me because Guild Wars has a PvP mode. If we had been playing a game that was exclusively kill computers, fine. But we're going to be playing people soon. And I was like, no, let's get that habit gone, like immediately.
I mean, I still beat you.
No, she didn't. That's a lie.
Once.
On the internet, that is a lie. She beats me at mini games. But did you just say once?
Once. I got my butt kicked like 15 times, but I did beat you.
I got beat by a button masher, so it didn't go well.
Button mashing, my favorite.
So that's a really good example, though, right? So there's someone that wasn't used to the interface hopping on, and you can imagine her having an MMO mouse right off the bat, which she didn't, I don't think.
But for Guild Wars 2, I did.
Okay, even worse. So here's a mouse with 500 buttons and a keyboard turner. There's no way she's using any of this stuff to its potential. And in fact, she would have been better off had I mapped a controller for the game and handed her a controller. Because the stick would have been move, the other stick would have been camera, and it doesn't take a lot of getting used to, and then you just need one or two buttons for attack, and there you go. Would it have been effective? Not really, but it would have been more effective. So there's a learning curve to consider. So how much time are you even willing to put into a game before that argument matters?
Yeah.
I want to list off like the other huge factor in all of this. The system that you're playing on determines the speed of which you're playing at. Meaning, if you use MNK on, say, a PS5, you can use it, but its speed isn't going to be as quick as if you have it hooked to a PC. So certain things kind of are there to factor in. So again, if you're using a controller on a PC, you have an advantage over someone using a controller on a console because the input latency is different. And that's something that again, I'm kind of looking at it from the numbers point of view for everybody. I'm going to read off the average accuracy distance or difference between a controller and an MNK, and then I want your reaction to it. For a controller, the average accuracy is 33.57%. For MNK, it's 25.72% accuracy between controller and MNK. I'm assuming that number, and I'm using the Google information, so there's probably a slight difference in that. but still it's a pretty drastic difference. And that's, I would say, like you're using both of them on PC.
So
Yeah.
I feel like there's a heavy insinuation there that, unless you said it backwards, that the controller's getting some aim assist in whatever game or games that this statistic was derived from. The other scenario that could be playing out, worth noting, is that on a mouse, you're going to go for the harder shots. So if someone runs behind you, on a mouse and keyboard, you're going to snap, turn around 180 and start shooting. On a controller, you're going to turn as fast as it lets you, and then you're going to shoot when it's ready. And I feel like, while that's minor, it is worth noting. And accuracy, we've talked about this before. A lot of the debate that we've mentioned in the past was heavily focused on, well, you get aim assist on a controller, so obviously the aiming is better. And if that statistic that you garnered is accurate across the board, or at least in most circumstances, it ignores the notion of everything else in competitive play, including, not the least of which, is the ability to actually rotate your character quickly enough to react.
That's
So,
what I was waiting to like
yeah.
follow up with. That's
If my
why I wanted your
accuracy was
responses.
90%, but you just run behind me and it takes too long to turn around, 30% of your bullets is going to be fine to kill me before I turn around.
Now I'm going to read off the next number based on those responses because I wanted that first and then I did it the other way. So MNK's aiming speed is roughly 2 to 3 times faster than the controller. So even if one is slightly more accurate,
A 5% accuracy loss for 2 to 3 times the amount of firing opportunities. Yeah.
so there's that big gap difference in that. So you're looking at one saying, well, I'm more accurate with this. Like accuracy means nothing if the other person's literally running circles around you and you're just going, I got you, I got you.
Well, certainly in the range that we're talking. I think you said, what, like 25 and 30 something?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're still within a 10% range of error. So like someone with an 80% accuracy up against someone with 90% accuracy is still basically who's going to shoot first, let alone who's going to shoot 2 to 3 times.
I also feel like a lot of people don't take into consideration that sometimes aim assist hinders your ability to play. Like there's been times where I've been playing a first person shooter and I had aim assist and I went to go kill somebody, but because there was somebody downed on the floor in front of them, my aiming slowed.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I got to them and then I ended up dead because I was already slowed from trying to aim at them.
Right.
So, I mean, I personally, I turn it off.
I turn it down. I never turn it off because I'm not that good. So there's a different aspect I'd like to talk about that we haven't mentioned much in the past, which is the notion of developers and which is superior for them. I can say, as someone who's done a lot of coding and is doing a good lift on our own game, it is massively easier to only consider mouse and keyboard when you're developing a game. Because you know what people don't do? They don't make games with a controller, right? You can make games that are controller compatible, controller friendly. You can make a game that you cannot use mouse and keyboard on. But what you can't do is get a freaking controller and start coding a game. Like, I'm sure there are video games, someone will find some niche thing to say, niche. But by and far, when you're coding a game or even using visual game engines, I need some more coffee, excuse me. Okay. You have to use your mouse at a minimum. And almost always you're using your mouse and your keyboard to develop a game. And that's ignoring the art side of things and all that stuff, right? Just straight up make the game logic. You're not doing that with a controller, you're doing it with a mouse and keyboard. So people are going to intrinsically favor development that they can then use the exact same tool. I don't want to stop coding, take my hands off my keyboard and mouse, and then go grab my controller, test something real quick, put it down, and then go back to the mouse and keyboard. It's slow. It's annoying. I do it anyway. But like, it is definitely easier to take the same mouse I'm already holding and just move it to a part of the screen, play the game, click to move. There you go. I would wager, not based on any facts, I would wager 90% of new game developers are coding for mouse and keyboard. At least first, even if they do both. It's too easy. And now let's think about it the other way. Every controller you add adds a level of complexity in terms of having to code around that, because your mouse and keyboard, for the most part on the computer, you're going to have one mouse, one keyboard generally in a computer. When you start adding controllers, someone just pulls out a controller, just plugs one in, and then suddenly like, oh, that input was lost. And we saw the Godot engine.
It's happened to me a couple times.
And it can be devastating on games that don't code for that. And even some engines are kind of hard to code around. We use Godot, whatever. I call it Godot, the Godot gaming engine. And that engine, prior to recent updates, I'm talking like last half year updates, really struggled with PlayStation specific controllers, which I favor, and having multiple of them plug in and plug out, to the point where we had to scrap a prototype because it just wasn't worth the lift to go in and rewrite the game engine code when I'm just trying to make a game, let alone a prototype. And I'm going to wager that that's a problem across all systems. You know, even Unity, I'm sure, has some edge case scenario where it's like, oh, it doesn't play nicely with Wii controllers or something like that, right? It gets really difficult to start trying to predict every type of controller that exists and might exist. Whereas if you're coding for like mouse and keyboard, unless they're from another country, you're covering most of your market. Why? Because mice and keyboard have basically been the same interface for decades when it comes to game development.
And I can point that out with games in specific, because if you look at, again, this is for those old enough to know, gaming started on PC, Apple, whatever platform, but it was PC-ish. Then it went to console. But when consoles started building up, they went from 2 controllers to 4.
Yeah.
Being able to hook directly in. Then as you got to the newer gen like consoles, the ability to hook 4 controllers in at once gradually disappeared, and it changed how the games were made.
Yeah.
If you looked at a lot of games where they had co-op, it was co-op for 4 players. Co-op now is basically 2 players. And if you want more than that, you have to do it online with other players.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is the reason why Nintendo's graphics are so low? Because they have the capability of having 4 controllers.
So there is some credence to that notion. I'm going to nerd out for... All right, I got a 60-second timer. Here I go. Multiplayer games at least used to, and in many cases still require you to basically render everything the game is trying to show you twice. And thus, simple math, obviously not 100% accurate, you're basically requiring 2 times the amount of power, 2 times the amount of pull on everything to run split screen. So you can imagine, what if you have 4 players? Now you're rendering 4 different perspectives and camera angles that are doing rendering logic, and it slogs things down. Notably, 1 or 2 years ago now, Baldur's Gate 3, when it first came out on consoles, was a slog for local co-op specifically. Crystal and I experienced it. Many other people have experienced it. To their credit, they did a wonderful job upgrading it over time. It's fantastic. But yeah, it absolutely takes more resources and more power on the system to try to show multiple perspectives on this same console. So you can imagine the console that's known as the family console needs to accommodate that notion, because most of its big games are going to be 2 to 4 players. And are. I mean, Mario Kart is on every single Nintendo system for the last, 30 years?
Oh, geez.
If not more.
I hope no one timed me, because I'm pretty sure that was like a minute and a half. Let's go high level and try to wrap this up a little bit.
Hmm.
Let's focus on competitive, because I think that's really the only arena where this matters.
I was trying to stay away from it.
No, we're going there, guys. Competitive in games that allow mouse and keyboard in controller lobbies. So let's come up with one or two examples. I'm going to steal one because I'm already talking. Marvel
I'll
Rivals.
let ladies go first because I know where she's going to go with it. And if she doesn't go with it, I know where I'm going with it.
Okay. I'm going to take Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals is a 6v6 PvP shooter, but in competitive play, they restrict consoles to consoles and mice and keyboard to mice and keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
You can optionally play with them, but not in the ranked system. And I think that's a wonderful call, and it needs to be that way.
Yeah, Apex Legends. You can't play with PC unless you have somebody who's on PC that's in your party. And I will say, it's much more difficult in PC.
It's not even close.
Mhm.
It's not even close.
I mean, I can't loot a death box and move. PC players can.
We
That
talked about
alone
that, yeah.
is enough. And I should say competitive play goes further, right? So like ALGs, they're like big competitions. They're all mouse and keyboard.
Well,
There's
some of
no
them, well, I'm trying to figure out who's still on controller. But again, it's based on the system. So you can have some people competing, but they're using a PC. So even though it's...
Wait a minute. Doesn't HAL use...
There are people that use controllers, but again, they're using it through PC, which affects the latency.
PC is
I'm
always going to have an
90% sure they're
advantage.
custom controllers. They're not
Joe
like
makes a-
stock.
I'm sorry. I was talking over you. Please continue.
No, I was just finishing the point that like it's not stock stuff because you can't play at that level. And again, this is any competitive game. None of them are playing with a stock controller. There's nobody. Which it's brands like Scuff, just to say one, and others that you have the custom key bindings and triggers and things like that, which give you that slight gap closure. But again, it's hooked to a PC.
Yeah. Joe makes a really good point. If you phrase it differently, if there was no difference between mouse and keyboard would always have an advantage because generally speaking, we're talking about computers, and computers are master race, whether we like it or not. They are. You can throw only so much money at your PS5. At some point, it's still just a PS5, or you've made a custom Frankenstein computer that took parts from a PS5. But generally, you're limited, right? You get a custom rig, you can throw tens of thousands of dollars at it, and it will give you an advantage. So that is a really good point. I actually am going to take back something I said recently, which was the last topic I wanted to cover, because there's one more. I'm sorry. But wait, there's more. This is a longer one because we have someone going on a trip soon, so we want to make sure we get this all in. Let's talk about it in a way we generally don't talk about it. Spice it up a little bit. I would argue that mouse and keyboard and controller, I've kind of touched on this in terms of comfort, has a different impact based on the genre of game you're playing. So cozy games, I think there's probably an even split, right? I think it's going to depend on where the game's even available. So I know for sure I have plenty of friends that play cozy games, and there's a lot of cozy games on computer, like thousands. I also feel like I would personally enjoy a cozy game like Minecraft more on a controller. How do you guys feel about a cozy game?
As a cozy game girly, again, it depends on the game. Minecraft controller all day. Stardew Valley, Fields of Mysteria, games that have item bars. Well, see, Minecraft does too. I don't know why my brain never plays Minecraft on mouse and keyboard. But like I can't play Stardew Valley on the console. I own it on console. But I like the mapping and the ability to use my mouse to its full capability on computer than I do on console. So I don't know. It depends on the game, per usual. But mouse and keyboard's better.
All right, I'm going to make the argument for somebody that has small hands. And dexterity is kind of like a big thing, especially as you start to get a little bit older. So I noticed not too long ago when I tried to do something on MNK, my finger, again, I'm touching almost 40, so I don't care how old people I think I am, but yeah, I'm touching 40. So the idea of like moving my fingers around that way to play certain games starts to become uncomfortable. And again, I'm somebody that's done manual labor since I was 18, so my hands are pretty banged up compared to a lot of other people. So it becomes a factor at certain points. Even the difference between a PlayStation controller and an Xbox controller can feel kind of weird to my hands. So going based on dexterity and things like that, I tend to lean towards controller. And I'm going to use a game called Diablo as my example. It's not exactly a cozy game, but I would always prefer to play.
It's like the opposite.
Kind of is.
For
if you like
whatever
Squid.
reason, like the button layouts and the ways. I remember being so excited when it switched from PC exclusive to consoles.
Yeah.
Because for me, the button layouts and things like that was so much easier for me just to kind of play it as like a calmer way of doing it. Where on PC, again, I have smaller hands. Depending on the keyboard that I'm using, becomes kind of a reach.
Yeah.
Even though there's more options. And again, I use a generic mouse. I never used a full-on gaming mouse, which I think would have been a factor. But I'm going based on my experience in that. So using a controller where it's like everything is kind of just laid out, and it's not a game that has a million different options that you want to kind of tweak around. I don't play it at that level of it. To me, it's kind of like my no-brainer game where I'm just playing it and button mashing through monsters, and it's all just there. So that's my thing is controller because I think just dexterity-wise, it's easier.
Yeah, it definitely feels more ergonomic. I won't even say it feels. Mouse and keyboard is less ergonomic because the task it's designed for is not for your hands. It's to effectively put letters into a computer. That's what the keyboard's for. Now, there are ergonomic keyboards and all this other stuff that people have designed over the course of years, but the average person has a keyboard that looks like a keyboard from 50 years ago. It may have better keys and all that stuff, but it's a keyboard because it's designed to fit all of our alphabet and numbers there. Right. And that's, especially the cheaper you go, the less ergonomic they generally tend to be. Most controllers are literally designed to be held in as comfortable a position as possible because they want you holding that for as long as possible to play all the games that console has. That should be true across the board. So ergonomics is a big factor in, we have to cut the baseline, right? In the average consumer.
The stock starting point.
Precisely. So I'm going to weigh in with my final verdict that if you're concerned about ergonomics, you're concerned about comfort and ease of use, I argue that controller is superior. Mm-hmm. However, if you're concerned about sheer performance, mouse and keyboard all day.
I'm the same.
Yeah. I mean, I felt a big difference in a game that, I'm going to wrap this up here in a second, but a game that Maverick and I play is Marvel Rivals. We mentioned that.
TTV, Lillian Seath plug.
Yeah, TTV, Lillian Seath Gaming on, Twitch. Anyways, so we play it on console. There was one day, and because we're addicts, it went down. So we downloaded it on computer, and we played mouse and keyboard for a day.
With our friends,
With our friends. And mind you, we were like, oh my God, we're amazing. We're like cracked at this game because we had the mindset from this game. but like came over here and the aiming was just so much easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Our
we
buddy
still
was
went
like-
back to console though.
Oh yeah, because the comfort. My buddy was like,
Comfort.
"What's your DPI at?" And I was like, "I don't know, like 4,000." He's like, "Jeez, you're supposed to slow it down to aim." And I was like, "No, do you know how long I've been throttled by how slow I turn? I want to go fast. I want to go so fast."
I'm in my Ferrari. Don't tell me to slow down.
Yeah, and it was funny too. I kind of like was boasting myself. I used to play competitive PvP. You just haven't seen me because I use a controller all the time. But like unlock my potential, drop the weights like DBZ style. Nerd.
Nerd.
Anyway, it was literally like releasing your chakra points in Naruto kind of nonsense. Like, let's go, level unlocked. But it's just not comfortable for me.
Yeah. And that's, yeah, I play a lot of mouse and keyboard and controller games. And I just, for comfort, for, you know, being able to sit on a couch or whatever, it's always going to be controller. But
Remember, if you're
mouse and keyboard's
losing,
better.
it's always a skill-based issue. I ranked in the top 100 in some of the old PvP games in the early 2010s with a mouse trackpad. So
Yeah.
skill issue is always the innate issue.
No, the correct answer is hacks. Anyways, so on that note, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you again for joining us at Gaming at the Round Table. I'm Crystal with Maverick and JoJo. Bye.